Parents, if you're listening with your kids, cover their ears for a second. The NBA can take their last 2-minute reports and shove it up their ass. At some point, NBA officials need to be held accountable when they consistently disrespect an organization like the Sacramento Kings and officiate them differently than their opponents. It's one thing if it happens every now and then, and you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to see what's going on. There's star treatment and there's star team treatment, and for the second time on this road trip, the Sacramento Kings have not only lost to their opponents, they've lost to the NBA officials. You're listening to the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off-season. Today presented by Prize Picks. You can go on to Prize Picks right now, and if you sign up, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONNBA for a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. I'll tell you more about them later on in the show. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports producer and reporter here at ABC 10. I'm currently in my office at the ABC 10 studios. There's just one door and wall that separates me from the ABC 10 newsroom, and I'm going to try not to disturb all of the evenings that they're having and all the work that they're getting done by yelling and screaming at this camera right now, because the frustration that every Sacramento Kings fan feels right now is not just based off of the Kings blowing a lead, is not just based off of the Kings losing a game that they should have won. The Kings should have defeated the Golden State Warriors in this game, and for the most part, the Kings did so many things right that once again, this is one of those games where I want to start the post-game podcast off talking about the positives, talking about the important things and the growth that the Kings showed in this game. Now, there's not going to be a Silver Linings podcast, and it wouldn't have been a Silver Linings podcast even without the BS ref controversy at the end of the game. But for goodness sake, Sacramento did so much good that it's so ridiculous and it sucks that I have to start out a podcast not talking about the basketball game, not talking about Steph Curry's incredible performance to drag the Golden State Warriors to that comeback win with the amazing fourth quarter that the Warriors ended up putting together. I have to talk about NBA officials for the second time in 3 games screwing the Kings over with the final play of the game. Letting Tyler Hero get away with a travel. Last 2-minute report confirmed it was a travel. Didn't matter. The basket stood. And I took this, I turned on my microphone. I stood in front of this camera after that game and I said, you know what? I'm okay with that non-call. I get that it was the wrong call, but I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the way that game went, the Tyler Hero shot dropping. At that point in time, I wasn't as mad as I know many of you were with Tyler Hero not getting called for that travel. We certainly weren't as mad as Mike Brown was, or I certainly wasn't as mad as Mike Brown was after that game. Regardless of that, this is far more egregious to me. For the Sacramento Kings to have an opportunity with a second left to have to hit a 3 to send the game to overtime. They inbound the ball to Kevin Huerter, and he has Klay Thompson all over him. A hand on his back and the other hand on his shooting arm. The referee is standing as close as I am to this camera right now, and they blow the call. No whistle, nothing. And we all know the reason why there was not a whistle blown here. It was not because the referee missed it. It was because the Sacramento Kings were the ones shooting, and the defending champion Golden State Warriors were the ones on defense. Had the roles been reversed, if it were Klay Thompson shooting and Kevin Huerter defending, that's a foul 100% of the time, and you cannot convince me otherwise. I can't stand it. And what's more frustrating to me, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist at all. You can go back to the 2002 Western Conference Finals and leave a trail of breadcrumbs from that game all the way to today if you really want to talk about a conspiracy that the NBA has against the Sacramento Kings. You don't have to be that to point out the ridiculousness that is how the NBA officiates the Sacramento Kings. It's not fair. It's not equal. Now, I understand, and I have accepted, even if I hate it, I have accepted the fact that star players get star calls. Certain players, like Steph Curry, get calls that most other players do not get. That is the way of the NBA. It sucks. It will never not be frustrating. That is the way that it is. And even if I have accepted that, I'm not okay with it. Even if I know that's the case, I'm not okay with it. But it's even worse when it's team-on-team crime. It's even worse when the NBA officials treat the Sacramento Kings exactly how Kings head coach Mike Brown pointed it out, which is they see the purple. In this case, they see the white, they see the Kings across the front or Sacramento across the front, and they officiate it differently. They don't expect the Kings to win, and they allow that bias to affect the work that they do. Now, NBA officials are human. Humans make mistakes. And I understand being an NBA official, being an official of any sport, especially on the professional level, is an incredibly hard job. But you get no sympathy from me. Because even if it's a hard job, you're getting paid to do it. You're trained, highly trained to do it at the highest level in the world. There is no higher level of NBA or basketball officiating than being an NBA official. You go through years upon years upon years of training, and most of these refereeing crews have years upon years upon years of experience. They study the rule book, even if it changes every offseason. They study it meticulously. They know what a foul is and what a foul isn't. And yet, they allow themselves to be swayed, not necessarily by a flow of a game, and not just by the individual star who's involved in the play. They allow themselves to be swayed by their preconceived notions of who should win a game between a defending champion and a team that hasn't won or made the playoffs in 16 years. It's not okay. And at some point, accountability has to be held. Because the last 2-minute report is going to come out tomorrow and is going to say, yep, Kevin Huerter was fouled. Sorry, for the second time in 3 games, Kings, you got screwed, or we missed it. Sorry, bummer, we'll do better next time. The last 2-minute report is trash. It's trash. It's useless. Nobody likes it because all it is the NBA admitting to their mistakes but not doing a damn thing about it. At some point, an NBA official has to be held accountable for making the wrong choices. I don't know if it's a fine. I don't necessarily agree with a paycheck being taken away for getting a job or getting a call wrong because they're still doing the job, right? I don't necessarily agree with the fine route. But whether it's taking them off of games for a while or putting them into more training or having warnings, and as soon as they make mistake after mistake after mistake, maybe 2 or 3 strikes, then they're suspended temporarily. Now, suspended sounds like a harsh word, but suspended temporarily from officiating. At some point, the officials have to be held accountable because a piece of paper or a document online that tells me that the refs got it wrong does nothing for me, and it does nothing for the integrity of the game. Because still, consistently, it's the same team that gets screwed. Now, referees miss plays and miss calls for both teams all night long, every given night. Most of them are forgivable. Again, they're human. They make mistakes. It's the human element of the game that I will always prefer over any kind of robotic referee replay system scenario that the future can come up with. I always prefer the human element. But when it comes to these moments, when it comes to the purpose of getting a call right that has the most dramatic effect on a game at the end of a game, if the purpose is to be correct and to get it right, then you either need to implement some kind of review system regardless of if there's a foul call or not. You have to change the head coach challenge system or go to what like an NFL, what the NFL does, and in the last 2 minutes the booth reviews it, not the teams. I don't know what the solution is, but there needs to be something that the NBA implements to stop this from happening. Because I'm sick and tired of watching it happen to the Sacramento Kings more than most other franchises simply because they are the Sacramento Kings. And if you're watching and you're a Warriors fan, if you're watching and you're a fan of 29 other teams, and maybe you're rolling your eyes right now going, this is just a Kings honk who's crying and bitching and moaning after the Sacramento Kings blew a lead to the Golden State Warriors. If you want to feel that way, fine. I challenge you to watch a full season of Sacramento Kings basketball and tell me that you don't see some kind of officiating bias. It doesn't need to be as extreme as it was tonight or as it was in the Miami Heat game. It's not always that extreme, but it's there. It exists, and it's happened all season long from start to finish with Domantas Sabonis fouling out, De'Aaron Fox not getting to the foul line, Tyler Hero's game winner, and now Kevin Huerter being obviously fouled by Klay Thompson at the end of the game. We're 8 games into the season, people. The Kings are, 9 games now, right? Are they 3-6? Yeah, they're 3-6. We're 9 games into the season. I just gave you 4 different examples, 2 of which are extended over multiple games, with the Sabonis fouling out and Fox not getting to the foul line as much as he should. There is an obvious bias. There is a clear disrespect with how the NBA officiates the Sacramento Kings compared to other teams. And I know the Kings are not alone in this, and that's a bigger problem. It's not just the Kings being screwed. I'm not saying the Kings are on a mountain of BS and everybody else is happily living their life where the referees are treating them fairly 100% of the time. No, there are far more teams than just the Sacramento Kings who are at the bottom of the league who are struggling and have struggled for years that take on the Golden State Warriors, that take on the Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics, the Miami Heat, the juggernauts of the league, and get treated like this because, again, NBA officials expect the Kings to lose and they officiate the games accordingly. That is wrong. There is always going to be an emotion and a human element to officiating. But there is a way to have those 2 things and not allow them to affect your decisions. It's supposed to be a neutral party. Act like it. Treat it that way. And don't pretend that a last 2-minute report, don't pretend that admitting to your mistakes but not doing a damn thing about it when it keeps happening over and over again is enough for organizations, for fans, for players even, to just accept and be willing to roll over and realize that that's just the way the NBA is. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. There's really no easy way for me to segue out of this, so I'll tell you that today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, today's rant, is brought to you by Prize Picks. Now, Prize Picks is the only way, in my opinion, and the best way to play daily NBA fantasy. Instead of dealing with the monotonous day-to-day lineup setting, and maybe you enjoy this part of it, I personally don't, and having to deal with taking on teams that maybe their best players happen to play 3 or 4 times during a week when your best players only play once or twice. It's not necessarily fair, but that happens all the time over the course of a season. And there are many things like that that make NBA daily fantasy a major grind and sometimes a major bummer. Prize Picks is not that. The way Prize Picks works is you take 2 to 5 players and you take either their over or their under on their projected scoring totals. Let's say you pick 3 players from this game. Steph Curry at 30.5, you take the over. De'Aaron Fox at 26.5, you take the over. Malik Monk at 12.5, you take the over. If you get all of them right, you can win up to 10 times your money. It's pretty awesome. And the best part is you're not taking on any sharks or professional gamblers or anything like that out there. You are going up against the house. You're going up against Prize Picks and Prize Picks alone. And to give you even more incentive to play and have the most fun you can have with Daily Fantasy NBA, you go to prizepicks.com. You sign up right now. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNBA. You can get a 100% instant match up to $100. You deposit 100, you get 100 instantly. You deposit 50, you get 50 instantly. Again, it's the first time you sign up using promo code LOCKEDONNBA. Play Prize Picks, the #1 way to play daily fantasy NBA. All right, now that I'm done complaining about the referees and gotten off my soapbox a little bit, I'll actually talk about the basketball game because it was a very entertaining and albeit frustrating basketball game for the Sacramento Kings. What I do like is that the Kings took multiple punches in this game. The Warriors got off to a 9-1 start. They went on a run to start the 3rd quarter. And in both of those instances, the start of the 1st and start of the 3rd quarters, Sacramento hung around and managed to overcome it. They ended the first half on the 1st quarter on a major run to actually take a lead heading into the 2nd quarter. And so much of that was because of De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk, and I'll get to the 2 of them in a second. But for Sacramento to be able to take the punches, the multiple gut punches that the Golden State Warriors were throwing in this game, there are 3 different pushes that the Warriors made between the 1st quarter and the start of the 4th quarter that Sacramento handled. One of them, they came from behind to overcome it. The other couple they snuffed out before things got too bad. The Warriors would get close, they'd get to within 1 point. They did so in the 3rd quarter, and the Kings created extension and created separation again. How many times are the roles usually reversed? How many times have we seen The Sacramento Kings make that run, make it a game, get close, but then it's the Golden State Warriors or whoever the opponent is that creates that separation again and kind of snuffs things out. Sacramento was the one on the hill that was fighting off the Warriors in this game until, after eating all those gut punches and overcoming those gut punches, you knew in the fourth quarter that Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors were going to throw one final haymaker, and it connected in a big way to the jaw of the Sacramento Kings. It didn't knock them out, but it certainly staggered them, and they never really could overcome it. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they were playing one of the greatest players of all time in Steph Curry, who had just a phenomenal Steph Curry performance. 47 points, 17 of 24 from the field, 7 of 12 from three-point range. He was just ridiculous. Also had 8 rebounds, 8 assists, so flirted with a triple-double. I mean, there's some of these plays where it's like, okay, what can you do to stop him? Like, there were a couple plays, Steph hit some big threes towards the end of the game. I think he hit back-to-back big shots. One was a big step-back three to give the Warriors the lead. Then the Kings answered. Then Steph Curry came down and hit a contested two, both of them over Kevin Huerter. And I thought Huerter played excellent defense on both of those possessions. Didn't matter. Steph Curry is just Steph freaking Curry. And if the referees give Steph Curry bias, so do rims, damn it. Because that man gets more of a shooter's roll around the rim than anybody else on this planet. Rims are Steph Curry's best friends. Of course, he's usually nothing but net from three-point range, but if he does hit the iron, a majority of the time, it's going to still find its way in. That's just the skill, and that's just how phenomenal Steph Curry is, right? He's so great. I don't need to go into more than that. Steph Curry is phenomenal. Steph Curry literally dragged the Golden State Warriors to this win. I think they came in on a 5-game losing streak, if I'm not mistaken. They came into this game off of a road trip where they didn't win a single game. They were desperate in a lot of ways for this win, and you could see it in how Steph Curry had to play. Now, there's part of me, there's the angel on my shoulder that's saying, hey, the Kings needed to bring out that out of Steph Curry in order for the Warriors to win. There's the other side of me that goes, Steph Curry had that night. Nobody else really did anything, and the Kings still lost. Like, you know what Steph Curry is going to do. You know what he's going to provide. He's very difficult to stop. And for the most part, when it came to everybody else on the Warriors roster, Sacramento did a great job. Now, Andrew Wiggins had 25 points on 10 of 17 shooting. It was a solid 25, but he didn't go into takeover mode by any means. The Kings did a good job against Klay Thompson. His 16 points, 6 of 18 shooting. That's a pretty, overall, inefficient night for Klay Thompson. Draymond Green had 11 points in 36 minutes. The only basket really worth a damn was when he absolutely took Keegan Murray to school at the end of the game. Now, Keegan, I understand, was paying a lot of attention to Steph Curry, and it looked like the Warriors were drawing up another one of those patented Draymond Green handoff screens to Curry to get him separation to hit another outside shot. Keegan Murray cheated on that screen, and instead of handing the ball off, Draymond just turned the corner, took it right to the lane for a dunk. Like, welcome to the league, kid. Welcome to the league, Keegan. It was a tough moment, a big moment for the Golden State Warriors, a big moment for Draymond Green, recognizing how much Keegan was playing and how much of Keegan's focus and the Kings' focus in general was on Steph Curry, and he took advantage for a big bucket there. I'm not the biggest fan of Draymond Green in the world. I know many of you aren't either, but you got to give props in that moment. But overall, I mean, this Warriors bench is abysmal. Abysmal. I'm trying to count 9, 11, 15 points off the bench total for the Golden State Warriors in this game. 15 points. Meanwhile, Malik Monk off the bench had 24. Malik Monk almost doubled the Warriors bench production by himself. Plus, Davion Mitchell gave you 12 points. I'm going to talk about Davion Mitchell a little bit later on. Got a couple points out of Chimezie Metu, 9 points from Terrence Davis. Like, the Kings bench absolutely dominated the Warriors bench. The Kings did so many things right to win this game, and I feel like I've been able to say that a lot over the course of the season. Maybe that makes it frustrating. You could also look at it as, okay, the Kings are really making progress. They're really, really so close. I know a ton of you are tired of hearing that, right? Enough of so close. And I tweeted out, while this fourth quarter was going on and while the Warriors were making this push, I tweeted out that I loved this test for the Sacramento Kings. Now, I know the Kings have been tested and have failed this test many, many times over the last 16 seasons. But this team needed to face this test. They faced smaller tests over the course of the game and passed. This one was the big final test, and ultimately they failed. They could not overcome Steph Curry. They could not overcome the haymaker. And really, outside of the piss-poor officiating at the end of the game, really the only thing that I'm very frustrated with the Sacramento Kings, two things at the end of the game. Number one is Davion Mitchell, I thought played really, really well. Like, I will take this game out of Davion Mitchell every night. He had 12 points, 5 of 11 shooting, only had 1 assist, so a couple steals. Like, the stats don't necessarily jump off the page, but Davion Mitchell did a really good job defending Steph Curry, especially in that third quarter. I thought Davion Mitchell, even though the third quarter was kind of a big quarter for the Warriors, even if they only scored 24 points. I thought the Warriors had almost a bigger quarter in the third in some ways than they did in the fourth, even though they scored 37 in the fourth quarter. But in that third quarter, Davion played really good defense against Steph Curry in the final 5 or so minutes of that quarter, put in a really good shift. No matter how Davion is struggling on the offensive end, and we know he's struggling on the offensive end, no matter how bad it's getting for Davion on that end, he can always be a positive impact player for the Kings when he's playing defense. He did so tonight. And yet at the end of this game, when Steph Curry and the Warriors were rolling, trying to put this game away, Mike Brown elected to have Terrence Davis out on the floor instead of Davion Mitchell. So Davion couldn't guard Steph. I disagree with that decision. I think Mike Brown made a mistake there. Not as big of a mistake as Mike Brown and the Kings made with their clock management, though, at the end of the game. Like, the Kings' clock management at the end was horrendous. There was, I think, 22 seconds remaining in the game, 20 seconds on the shot clock for the Warriors. The Kings try to trap Steph Curry, foul him, so the shot clock turns off because it resets to 14. There were less than 14 seconds on the game clock at that point. So at that point, as soon as they inbound, even if it goes to Curry, you foul. Instead, the Kings tried to trap Curry again and ultimately fouled him with like 1.3 seconds left. Now, even if they trapped Curry and forced a turnover, forced a steal, and got a timeout off, we're talking about having 2 seconds maybe, even with the ability to advance. We're talking about having like 2 to max 2.5 seconds to try and win the game only down 1. You don't need a three-pointer at that point, but you still only have 2 seconds. I know Steph Curry is one of the greatest free throw shooters of all time, maybe the greatest free throw shooter of all time. And fouling him means you're more than likely going to be down 3. But down 3 with like 11 seconds remaining versus down 3 with 1.3 seconds remaining, massive difference there. I thought it was a big mistake, clock management-wise, by Mike Brown and the Kings at the end of that game. It's part of the reason they lost. Of course, it didn't really matter because Kevin Huerter got a game-tying attempt off, was fouled, and the referees don't really care because it's the Sacramento Kings that are shooting the shot. De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk were excellent. I mean, they combined for 62 points. Yeah, 62 points. No, sorry, 52 points in this game. They were excellent. And one of the things I love, and I tweeted this out, one of the things I love about De'Aaron and Malik, like when they're back on the floor together, it instantly goes back to Kentucky days, which is awesome, right? But one of the things I love about them is they're such a good combo in their demeanor on the floor. If you notice, like De'Aaron is just smooth criminal, right? He is so smooth with everything he does. He coasted to 28 points tonight. Absolutely coasted. Had a couple of moments towards the end of the game where maybe he tried to get a little too ISO hero ball, but I can live with it. For the most part, Fox coasted. Now, Malik Monk, every single time he scored, he had that big lob that he threw to Chimezie Metu in the second half that was awesome. Like, Monk is screaming, roaring, pounding his chest, doing everything. Like, he is the energy. He's that Energizer bunny off the bench that I love so much about the Kings. And when he and Fox are together on the floor, even if they have moments that are exciting together, you have that energy, that eruption, that passion with that calm, cool demeanor that De'Aaron brings. They're really yin and yang in so many ways. I want to talk about Harrison Barnes, and I want to talk about Keegan Murray. The difference between the Keegan and Harrison inefficiencies, because there is a big difference between the two. And let's revisit something that I talked about in the most recent Locked On Kings podcast, which is starting the first and third quarters. Kings got off to a bad start in both those quarters. Almost overcame it, but almost doesn't matter in a loss. We'll get to that. 0 points, 3 rebounds, 1 steal in 22 and a half minutes for Harrison Barnes. There's getting off to slow starts, and then there's things happening so much that it starts to become a trend. And with the exception of one good game, which I think was the Miami game, if I'm not mistaken, the Miami game in Sacramento, Harrison Barnes has been not just bad, he's been non-existent. And that's terrifying. When someone of Harrison Barnes' experience, someone who, in theory, should be able to just plug and play with this Sacramento Kings team, when they can't find a way to have any sort of impact while being a starter and playing significant minutes nightly, and it's happening this much now, it's starting to become a trend. A really concerning trend. And I don't know at what point you pull the trigger. I know a lot of people want to instantly put Malik Monk into the starting lineup and boot Harrison Barnes to the curb after this game, and that might honestly be something that the Kings staff has to consider. Really strongly has to consider, because the Fox, Herter, Monk trio, I thought played really, really solid together. And if you look at the limited time that the Fox, Herter, Monk, Murray, Sabonis five have played together this season, their offensive rating is actually a little below their team average, but their defensive rating is significantly better than their team average. Small sample size, but we believe that lineup can work. Maybe it's time to go to that. Because it's one thing to stick with a guy through a slump, which is what the Kings should do with Keegan Murray. It's another thing to stick with a guy when he's a complete non-factor. In a lot of ways, the Kings are playing 4-on-5 when Harrison Barnes is out there right now, and that just can't happen for someone of Harrison's status. Just shocking. But the difference between that and what Keegan Murray's going through, Harrison Barnes is non-existent. Keegan Murray's in a slump. But even though Keegan Murray struggled again in this game, he still did some things, like 6 points, 2 of 7 shooting, 1 of 4 from three-point range, still a lot of good looks. Nothing's dropping for him right now. Still pulled down 7 rebounds, had a couple of assists, a couple steals. Was he great? No. Was he good? No. Was he fine? Probably not. He was bad, but he still contributed in other ways. Harrison Barnes was terrible and didn't contribute in any way. And that's hard to say for someone like Harrison, because I'm a big fan and big supporter of Harrison. And if you listen to Locked On Kings this summer, how adamantly I defended the Kings holding on to him. I expected way more than this. Everybody should expect way more than this from Harrison. As for Keegan, there's absolutely no reason to panic. No reason to panic. Maybe it's earlier than I wanted to see Keegan hit a rookie wall, but I expect him to work his way through this. Keegan Murray is going to be fine. There's anything else that I'm more confident with, or nothing else that I'm more confident with in this podcast today, it's that Keegan Murray is going to be fine. Just like the Sacramento Kings would have been fine if they had done something that I had pointed out and had focused on something that I had pointed out in the last podcast, which is the next step that this Kings team has to make to winning consistently is finding a way to start the first and third quarters both strong. A lot of times they'll have a bad start to one and a great start to the other. In this game, they had a bad start to both. Now, thankfully, those bad starts didn't last too long. The Warriors got off to a 9-1 start, and the Warriors brought the Kings' 12-point lead down to a 1-point lead early on in the third quarter. That can't happen. But Sacramento nearly did enough to withstand it. And it's so frustrating because in so many ways, Sacramento had this game won. They did what they needed to do to win this game. And it's because of those slow start to those quarters, plus other things that we've heavily discussed in this podcast, that Sacramento wasn't able to pull it out. I know you want to react to this. I know you want to talk about this. Let's talk. At MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. I know you're already getting loose in the YouTube comment section down below if you're watching this podcast. I appreciate your support. Richaun Holmes didn't play a second of this game. He didn't get in. Is he out of the rotation, or was this just a decision by Mike Brown because of how well Chimezie Metu played last time the Kings and Warriors played? We're going to talk about that, and I'm going to tell you why I still think it's way too early to give up on Richaun Holmes if you're the Sacramento Kings. I'm going to do that on tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast. And then on Wednesday, I'll, of course, be in the Golden One Center for the Kings and Cavaliers. Looking forward to that game. And if you're heading to that game, let me know. Would love to chat with you and see you there. Hopefully it's a better result than this one tonight. Hopefully the referees are actually competent at the end of that game. Appreciate you sticking with me on the soapbox. Appreciate you sticking with the Sacramento Kings through all the ups and downs, mainly downs. It's just another bump in the road. Hopefully the Kings can overcome it. But there's a lot of things also to like about this team. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.